Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Speedrunners and Coffee, the show where we find out about all your favorite speedrunners. Today, my guest is quite the eccentric speedrun host, but also has been running Super Mario 64 as well as a ton of Harvest Moon. It's the lovely Lanaruse. How are you doing
Hello.
today?
I'm doing pretty well overall. How are you today?
I am good. I'm good. So, obviously, the first question is what got you into speedrunning?
Ooh, okay, I love this question. So, where it all started was the very beginning of 2016. It was January 2016, and I had a really good friend that I had met through choir who was also into video games. And he had messaged me one day and said, "Hey, Lana, I have found a really cool stream that you should watch. And it's called Games Done Quick. And they're currently running one of their events, which is Awesome Games Done Quick 2016." So I tuned in, and it was the most mesmerizing thing I have ever seen in my life. And basically, what happened after that was I watched the event all week, started my love for speedrunning. And then because I was at a point of transition in my life where I had just graduated with my first degree from university and I didn't really know where I was going from there. What I did to fill the time was say, hey, streaming doesn't look so hard. Maybe I could give it a shot. So that's what started casual streaming. And then basically, I just casual streamed very off and on for a couple years. I wouldn't even consider myself not even close to regular. I streamed for a month, then disappeared for almost a year. And then 2018 was when I started officially speedrunning. Do you want to hear the origin story of SM64?
Yes, because that's the next question. What made you pick the game that you started with?
Awesome. So, yeah, just to get into that, I grew up playing Super Mario 64. It was one of the first games that my dad had introduced to me. My dad is a very big gamer, and I guess it's genetic because that was a game that I've always come back to. I have a lot of memories of playing it as a child, but honestly, never beating it. I got to some of the second floor levels or basement levels even, and I remember them being so overwhelming. The Lethal Lava Land portrait in particular terrified me. I definitely had nightmares about that one. But anyways, what made me choose SM64 was I had been doing a casual playthrough on my Twitch channel in 2018, and I had a couple people join throughout that really enjoyed watching it because they said, there's so many SM64 speedruns and not so many casual players. So they wanted to see a casual player go through. And at the very end of my playthrough, one of the people that was watching, his name is Packerzilla, who's also a speedrunner of SM64, said, "Hey, you should try a BLJ, which is a backwards long jump. And it's a trick that you use to zoom up a staircase essentially to blast into rooms that you should not have access to because you need a certain number of stars to access them." So this was the staircase up to the top floor, and I decided to try it out, and after a couple shots, I got it. So I said, "Hey, maybe I have what it takes to be a speedrunner." And that started my love of learning. I loved just the accessible tutorials that were there. That was kind of what the big thing that made me stick with it was there was a lot of information online about just beginner strategies and just how to run the game in general. So I watched a lot of those. I picked it up. My first run was miserable. It was something like 44 minutes or something tragic. And that was for 16 star, which is the category I started with and stuck with until I got to a time I was very happy with. And yeah, that's basically how it started was picking up SM64 because I had met people in the community that were really encouraging and said, "Hey, I think that you would be great at this. Try out this trick." And when it worked, it gave me a bit of a buzz, a bit of a rush. And that's when I learned that speedrunning and shooting for PVs and all that was something I really enjoyed doing.
Nice. Now, can you do the BLJ into Bowser 1?
No.
Okay, so we're at the same one.
So I always say that there's a part of me that always needed to stick to regular non-LBLJ. 16 star. And my biggest reason for that is because I am one of the blessed speedrunners that also has carpal tunnel. And if there is one thing that will aggravate your carpal tunnel, it's having to reset less than 2 minutes into a run repeatedly. So even though it was an interesting strategy, I one of the tactics I always took when approaching speedruns in general was I would rather be consistent than going for super fast tricks, failing them often, and having to reset constantly. So I tried to build up speed like that by being consistent, and that was one of the tricks I specifically did not use for that reason, was it might be a little bit faster, but it's gonna kill my wrist, so no thanks.
That's fair. I don't even do. When I was doing SM64, I didn't even do the appropriate star. Never mind
The
the BLJs.
Yeah, it's very, very tricky.
Yeah, because I would just do main floor because I can do main floor to 30. And
Mhm.
then, but I learned MIP skip and stuff like that. Or is that
Yeah.
what it? And
Mips
then,
click close, yeah.
okay, MIPS clip. And then I would do BLJs to top floor and then Bowser 3 because those ones are more doable than the other
Right.
ones.
Yeah.
But did you have an initial goal for the run?
Oh, wow. I'm trying to remember. So this was already about, yeah, 5 years ago. I ran SM64 from when about 2018 until 2020. So with that run in general, I think one of the first major goals I had was just to sub 20 minutes. Because I'd started, like I said, my first one was 44 minutes. And then I think my next one I was able to cut down to either somewhere around 30 minutes or 27 minutes or something. I don't remember. But yeah, I was able to cut it down pretty significantly, and then I said, "I think sub 20 minutes is my goal." And I got that, and then I got stuck at 19 minutes. I forget if I said sub 20. Oh, shoot, I forget if it was sub 20 I was aiming for or sub 19. But regardless, the last run I ever got, was an 18:32. And that's when I decided, I think we're done here because it was yeah, it was just too much after a while, and I believe I had been grinding for that goal for months. It was at the point where I was really beating my head against a wall. So yeah, getting that 18:32 was just such a big moment. Yes, here it is. So the last run I had had before that was in 1902, and I just wanted to sub 19, that was it, and I was trying and trying and trying, and then rather than just get a slight sub 19, I actually shaved off, yeah, 30 seconds off of my PB for the 18:32, which was unbelievable, and that's when I said, "I am done with this." And I moved on to another category for a while, but that was my main goal with, 16 star was sub 20 and then sub 19 before I quit.
That's fair. I made it to 40 minutes, and then
Nice.
I just kind of went like, because unfortunately, it's really difficult to do SM64 with one hand. So
Yep.
it's like, ah. So then you went and moved on to Harvest Moon. Take me through your decision process for that.
Yeah, for sure. So, I'll give a little bit of background in general for Harvest Moon. As a kid, I played a lot of Harvest Moon Magical Melody, which was a game that came out on GameCube in about 2004, 2005. And that was a game that I loved as a kid. Just the little chibi art style, all the fun tasks that you could complete. I always had a dream to live in a small town like that. I just thought it would be so charming. And what happened was, it would have been once again about January of 2020, and oh, it was around Christmas time actually, now that I remember, yeah. And I had been playing My Time at Portia, which is another sort of resource management farming style game. Really cute, very charming. And while I was playing, I had another streamer raid me named Demo Plays Games. And Demo told me that he was a Harvest Moon speedrunner, and I had never heard of such a thing. I didn't even know you could speedrun chill farming games at all. So, I got to know him and he said, "Hey, we have a Harvest Moon Valentine's marathon coming up around Valentine's Day. So you should come check out the stream and see what you think." So I watched the community stream for that marathon, And I watched so many of those runs again. There's kind of a pattern here. I get invited to watch a marathon and then I get peer pressured into a category. And that's what happened here too was I watched, I was amazed. I believe there was a magical melody run or there was supposed to be and there may have been tech issues. I don't remember fully. But that's what started my thought process of, hey, maybe I could learn Harvest Moon Magical Melody speedruns because I have a decent amount of game knowledge, I thought, at the time. And I knew the game pretty well overall. I knew the layout of the map, I knew the characters. So that was kind of what started. And if anyone remembers what happened in 2020, there were some things that went down that got me stuck at home for a while. So that became my pandemic project.
Nice. So you've ran a lot of Harvest Moon games. Did you ever think about going back to older ones, like Back to Nature? That just happens to be my favorite. Or anything like that?
Yeah, so I had done I always sort of joke that I'm a bit of a fake Harvest Moon Story of Seasons fan, only because I tend to pick a game and then stick to it really intensely. And I haven't actually played many Harvest Moon games. So even one of the big, very popular ones in the community is Harvest Moon 64, which I still have never played. They might disown me over that one. There have been others that, yeah, I've been interested in maybe looking at, but the thing that I find with Harvest Moon speedruns in general is a lot of the routing, a lot of the run in general is centered around your game knowledge, not just about the map and the characters and but things like affection and ways to maximize your efficiency when it comes to farming and animal tending to your animals, I guess. Husbandry, I think is the official term. And then so for me, starting to run a brand new game would mean taking on a lot of new game knowledge. So my main one that I just stuck to was Magical Melody, and we also had a bit of a Game of the Month series that we did for a bit. And then so that's when I learned Harvest Moon SNES, just the bad ending, which is a very short category. And then I believe I also did Harvest Moon A Wonderful Life, Proposal Percent. And I had also learned some Story of Seasons, Friends of Mineral Town, Rick Marriage, and then I later learned some Anne marriage. So yeah, I took on my favorite category in a lot of games is marriage percent. So I liked to refer to myself as the marriage master of a lot of games.
I mean, to be fair, you do hold a lot of marriage percent world records for Magical Melody.
I do for the time being. So I can explain the reasoning behind this one because there is actually a very funny reason. In Magical Melody, in most Harvest Moon games, you can get married, and there's usually a handful of eligible bachelors and bachelorettes. However, in Magical Melody, there are 21 potential candidates, each of them with their own unique route. Everyone has a set of base standard tasks that you have to complete in order to be eligible for marriage, but each person has a specific gift that they prefer or different unlock criteria and whatnot. So at the time when I had started running, every single character was divided into their own leaderboard. Or no, wait, no. Every single candidate had a different entry. So, for example, if I got first place in a marriage candidate, let's say Joe is one of the most popular, it would show first Lanaruse, Joe. And then underneath would be first another guy, let's say Kurt, also my name. And so at the time, I was making fun of the formatting of the leaderboard at the time before we had changed it. So I decided to really piss off the admins at the time and try to get as many marriage runs as possible so my name showed up as many times as possible on the leaderboard. Now we have one of my really, really good friends that I've met through Zeldathon, Vidya, has also picked up Harvest Moon Magical Melody speedrunning. So I do hold a lot of records. However, they are very old, and he is an incredible router. So he's giving me a run for my money in a lot of those categories, but he's also Canadian. So yeah, we're just saying the Canadians are taking over the leaderboard.
Hey, that was the thing when I started Silent Hill 3. It seemed like the Canadians were taking over because a lot
Yeah.
of the top runners were Canadian, and I was like, cool. And then that has somewhat since changed. But yeah, the Canadians were taking over. So, speaking of Zeldathon, that Zelda is often a series I hear you associate. But
Mhm.
if you look at your SRC profile, there's no Zelda here.
Nope.
And and it's funny with the SM64 because I remember talking to Pippi in a top hat, and she's like, "Wait, Lana did SM64? What?" And I was like, "I don't know. That's just what it says here. It says she's done SM64." So obviously, a lot of people associate you with Zelda, but why no Zelda?
Okay, that's a good question. So, in general, I think there's a part of me that does that on purpose because of my stubbornness more than anything. I am a very stubborn person, I can admit to it. But a part of it is that I do genuinely love the Zelda series. I've played through many of the games many times. I think Ocarina of Time, I'm sitting at like 16 or 17 casual playthroughs at this point. Other games less so, but that's the one that I sort of drilled into the ground. And there was a part of me that I think realized with my previous speedruns of games that I really enjoyed, like SM64, like Harvest Moon, that once I learn a speedrun of a game, I sort of shift into a new mindset with that game where I can only see it in terms of efficiency and proper movement and that sort of thing. And it sort of loses the casual charm for it. So there is a part of me that is tempted to even just learn some casual glitches or some fun things about it, but I've never really been tempted to pick up a speed run. So one thing that I have enjoyed, and I did an assisted version of one, is a randomizer. So randomizers of Zelda games tempt me, and I think still hold the charm of a casual playthrough to some degree, but it uses your game knowledge you already have. Whereas, yeah, learning a full-on speedrun is something I avoided on purpose, I guess, yeah.
Okay. So, what's your favorite Zelda?
Okay, so this is how I describe it in general. For me, I always say that Ocarina of Time has to hold the first position for me because that's the one that got me into the series in general. When I read Nintendo Power and heard that it was one of the most critically acclaimed games of all time. So I had the special edition on my GameCube, the one that came with the original Zelda, Zelda 2, and Ocarina of Time Majora's Mask and Wind Waker previews. And I picked it up and played it and fell in love and never looked back. So that holds my number one position purely for nostalgia and the purpose that it's held in my life. But I always say Breath of the Wild is kind of a very close second. It's just such a brilliant game that captured my heart and took way too many hours out of my life. And then number three, I frequently say Twilight Princess. Skyward Sword HD bumped it really close because I love the story but hated the motion controls. But the button controls that they added for the HD release on Switch really upped it for me. I have not reevaluated my list since Tears of the Kingdom came out, which I have now beaten, but I have not placed it on my rating scale yet. So I'd have to think on that and get back to you because it could very likely dethrone some of the ones that are currently on the list.
That is fair. Mine is Twilight Princess. It was tied with but the one thing that Twilight Princess has, and the one thing that really sells a Zelda game for me, is Ganondorf. There's
Ooh,
something
yeah.
there's something about Ganondorf that really elevates a Zelda game. I haven't
Mm,
played Tears of the Kingdom yet, but maybe Tears of the Kingdom will overtake that. But
yeah.
Twilight Princess had that edge to it that I really liked, and
Mhm.
also the ability to ride the horse further because when I played Ocarina of Time back in the day, that is something I would just do, is just ride on Epona for like hours. And then Twilight Princess, it was like, yay, I get to do this more. And then Breath of the Wild was like, yay, now I really get to do this. But there was no Ganondorf. So it was
Yeah,
like,
so
no.
I actually really agree with you there because I've just well, my husband makes fun of me and says, "I will like a game if it is third person medieval style, riding a horse across vast landscapes." So Ocarina of Time fulfills that, Twilight Princess fulfills that. And I think a big piece of those 2 as well is both of those games have a lot of beautiful exposition about the actual lore of Hyrule, kind of the origins of Hyrule, the goddesses, the Triforce, so those are also the ones I'll typically recommend to people that are starting out in the series because it gives such a good full picture of the just the kingdom and the world in general, I feel. And I know it changes game to game. Not every game takes place in Hyrule per se, but yeah, that's sort of a big reason why I love those ones as well.
Now, you technically answered one of my questions, which is there a game you love but would never run? Pretty much Zelda. But
Yeah.
is there a skip you wished was in a game that you run?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so there's a really funny one that we talked about at the last Harvest Moon Speedruns marathon, which took place about a month ago now. I was commentating for my lovely friend Jamie, aka Vidya, and there is a marriage speedrun called Jamie Marriage. And Jamie Marriage is one of the only unique candidates in that no other marriage candidate actually requires music notes to marry them, which is something that we thought was a thing for a while, but we actually found out later you don't need musical notes. And it's a core element of the game for anyone that's familiar with Magical Melody. Jamie is the one character that you need 50 musical notes for. And 50 musical notes is also how you complete any percent, which gets you credits. So the joy about Jamie Marriage is you actually cannot propose to them until you have beaten the game. And in that segment, it involves going into the Harvest Goddess Spring. And for every 5 musical notes you've collected, you get an instrument. Every single one of those instruments has a cutscene. So this segment takes about 9 or 10, like about 9 minutes. And not only that, because you have to do that for any percent as well, in Jamie Marriage, you also have to watch all of the credits. So that's like another 10 minutes. So there is an unskippable cutscene that is between 15 and 20 minutes in Jamie Marriage. Now, it's not a category that I run a lot. I've done it a couple times just to get a time I was happy with. But yeah, there's a 20-minute cutscene in there. So some sort of cutscene skipping would be really helpful. We have not figured it out yet. We have broken into the code a little bit to manipulate the amount of money you have. We found out how to like mess with the day a little bit, but that doesn't really give much for speedrunning. But we've also figured out how to mess with the code to convince the game that we have all the musical notes we need without having to actually go and collect them all. So maybe one day we'll be able to manipulate the code enough to convince it to get through a cutscene, but so far, no good.
Maybe they'll remake it in a Story of Seasons and allow you to just skip the cutscenes.
So that's my dream. Every time they talk about another remake, I am the one yelling, not yelling on Twitter or anywhere. Well, a little, but I am one of the main people hyping that up at every single turn.
That is fair. Are there any
Yep.
games you're currently playing?
Oh, yes. So there's a few. The one that I am playing currently at this exact moment, or not this exact moment, but today in general, is Xenoblade Chronicles 3, in particular, the DLC. I love Xenoblade Chronicles. That can go in the list of games that I love but would never speedrun because it's way too long. But yeah, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is incredible, and that was the one that I went back to after finishing up Tears of the Kingdom.
Nice. I haven't played 3 yet. Obviously, I speedrun 2, but I
Yeah.
haven't touched 3.
Oh, it's so good. I really recommend it. I cried a lot. It's a beautiful game. So I definitely recommend it, but very time consuming as well.
Yeah, I haven't, and I've never played 1. Fun fact, back in the day, I ended up pre-ordering it at an EB Games around the corner from my college. It doesn't exist there anymore. And I was like, yeah, and then I never picked it up. It was like $40 and I just never did. And I still haven't picked up
No.
the Wii or the Switch version.
Oh my goodness. That's one of my favorite games of all time. And 3, like without spoiling anything, 3 takes a lot from both 1 and 2. There's some nostalgia bits and some lore bits that are really relevant from it, but I really cannot judge you because I have not played 2. So that's on my list to do. But I got through 3 and now almost the DLC without having played 2 myself. So you know what? It's probably doable without 1.
Oh no, 2 has, or 3 has massive spoilers for 2. Oh no. If you've seen the ending to 3, you know what I'm talking about.
Maybe. Maybe I've avoided well, it'll probably spoil something for me, which is
Yes.
okay. I haven't figured out what the spoiler is yet, but I guarantee if I go back to play 2, I'll be like, "Oh, yes."
Yes. Given that this is a show called Speedrunners and Coffee, what is your favorite coffee?
You are asking the right gal. I am known as a coffee addict in my community. I had to cut back on my own pregnancy, which was sad, but I drink a lot of coffee. And my current obsession, if and I almost I get it at least twice a week at this point now. But my favorite type of coffee is a lavender honey latte. It's beautiful, just floral flavors in general, and always hot. I will never be one of those heathen cold coffee drinkers. I drink hot coffee even when it's 40 degrees. Sorry, Canadian. I know you're Canadian as well. But for any people that are not Celsius users, 40 degrees Celsius. And I will still be drinking hot coffee because it's so good. So yeah, that's my go-to or Canadian McDonald's coffee. If I'm just going for a basic fast food quick coffee, Canadian McDonald's coffee is so good and also goes on for dollar coffee relatively frequently. So that's one of my go-tos as well.
Okay. Because I know that apparently IKEA does free coffee every day. Apparently.
What?
Yeah, I walk by the one that's in downtown Toronto because it's literally around the corner from me, technically.
Uh-huh.
And there's just a sign that's like free coffee, and I'm like, what? Huh?
Wow.
I've never gone for their coffee, but I'm like, huh? This is weird.
That
Um,
is good to know.
yeah, and then of course there is the disgusting entity known as Tim Hortons, which is
Ugh.
also around the I don't know if you've ever heard me rant about Tim Hortons before.
I haven't, but I get it because as Canadians, I feel like we have a civic duty to appreciate Tim Hortons, but it genuinely is it's like a Canadian staple, but it's really not that good anymore. It used to be good, but it since they changed both their donut formula way back when and their coffee formula more recently, it's gone downhill. It's no good.
Do you know the story behind the coffee?
I do. Didn't it have to do with getting picked up by more of an American corporation and now they're somehow connected to Burger King and McDonald's has the old recipe?
McDonald's bought the supplier and said you can't supply to Tim Hortons.
Ah, okay, cool.
That
And that's
was
why I like McDonald's coffee.
that was around 2009 because I was working when McDonald's introduced coffee in Canada. I had no idea why because I didn't drink
Oh,
coffee
okay.
back then. So I don't know
Mhm.
the glory days of Tim Hortons. But if you're looking for a Canadian coffee shop to support that's still Canadian, there's this wonderful place called Second Cup.
Oh, yeah, second cup.
Granted, I don't go to Second Cup for coffee. I go for frozen hot chocolate, or as they call it
Amazing.
now, Frozo.
Frozo,
Or,
interesting.
or something. It's really weird because on the menu it says Frozo, and then in brackets it says frozen hot chocolate, or is it Frocho or something like that? It was really weird. I ended up finding out about this when I interviewed a variety pack, and then it was like, oh
Oh,
no.
yeah,
And it was like,
interesting.
yeah. And I also like Starbucks because there's a Starbucks and a Tim Hortons literally across the street from each other. And it's just like, well, no, Tim Hortons. The one thing I'll give Tim Hortons is they have better food than Starbucks. And I
True.
don't even know if Second Cup has food. And then McDonald's coffee. I'm not really a fan of McDonald's coffee. I guess it was that I just didn't like Tim Hortons' supplier either when they had it, because it just
Yeah,
doesn't taste good to me.
that's valid.
That being said, however, I did find a hack with David's Tea.
Okay.
So, Loblaws, which is a grocery store in Canada, it's
Mhm.
also known as Atlantic Superstore in the Maritimes and probably something else out west. I don't know. They sell the matcha tea tins and also some other tins, very few. But because of how cheap they sell it sometimes, I discovered how much tea you can fit in a 65-gram tin. You're looking at almost 240 grams of matcha tea
Amazing.
per can. Now, of course, you can take those cans back to a David's Tea and be like, fill this up with X amount, and they will give you a tiny discount because you brought your own container.
Hmm.
And so it's like, haha. But if you're looking for storage space for your teas, because of my experiments, I have figured out how much tea can these containers can fit, so you don't have to be like, oh, I now have like 18 containers of like X amount tea, because they don't just have these cans available to purchase on their
Okay.
own. Yes, I do ridiculous things like this sometime because I'm also a very big tea drinker.
It's all efficiency. I love it.
Indeed. Getting back to the video game portions, how do you prefer to learn a speed run? Do you take notes, practice beforehand, or dive right into full runs?
Ooh, okay. So in general, I'm a bit of a type A structured type of person. When it came to Super Mario 64, what I did was a lot of practice. And how I did that was by watching a beginner tutorial and copying the moves. And I would just do a stage over and over. So I would watch a stage and I would practice the moves and I would watch it again and practice. And I am one of those people that I want to practice longer before putting on a timer because the timer really stresses me out. So, I remember when I did SM64, it got to the point where I was practicing so much and people were like, "You really should just try a run." And I said, "Oh, okay, I'll go for it." So, that's the main thing I do. With Harvest Moon, that those games, it takes a lot more knowledge and planning out your days efficiently. So, one of the main ways that we route for that one is writing out in a either a Word document or just a note document on your computer, just what you do on each day. A lot of that fluctuates though, because there's a lot of RNG in those games. So that's where the game knowledge comes in, is if something catastrophic happens, you also have to act on the fly. So with those games, the way that you learn and practice just comes from knowing the game really well. And a lot of the learning comes from doing runs, having something catastrophic happen, and either quickly doing something on the fly and applying it into your route, or having to reset the run and then learning from your mistake and figuring out a new way to do things. So, yeah, if I'm going to learn a speed run, I take a lot of time beforehand, either off stream or on stream at the time, to learn about it and practice. But yeah, I tend to stick in the practice phase longer than some people would, I think. I'm no the first step sort of person where you just sort of jump in and go for it.
That's completely fair. What advice would you have given to your past self with your first speed run, knowing what you know now?
Ooh, what advice would I have given to myself? I think at first thought, I think I'm like, I actually did a lot of things that I still would do now in terms of going for consistency rather than fast skills, and I stuck to that. So I'm happy that I did that. That's still a piece of advice I would give to myself and anyone is when you're learning, sometimes it's better to just be consistent rather than fast. But for the second piece, I think really talking myself through some of the frustration that came, especially around the 20-minute and 19-minute mark. Because I distinctly remember a time where I got around that PB and then things started to get really frustrating. It was not a fun hobby anymore, and I got really achievement driven, and I needed that new PB. And I remember just getting really overwhelmed, and my anxiety was really high, especially if you have a good run and then something goes wrong. And I could get really discouraged and really frustrated, and I didn't really like that sort of characteristic in myself. I really wanted to validate that I could be frustrated, but also convince myself that it's just a game, it's just for fun, it's no big deal. So, I think now I would tell myself just to remind myself not to take it too seriously, to take a step back if I need, and that switching games or switching categories is not scary. I think at the time, it was about probably, yeah, 2019, 2020-ish. when I was starting to get more serious about content creation in general and still doing it as a hobby, but doing it more with intention rather than just whenever I wanted, whatever I wanted, just to try to be more efficient and grow the channel a bit more. And there was a part of me that was scared that if I left 16 star, if I left SM64, that that could affect my audience. And although, people come and go with anything, it actually was good to change after a certain amount of time when that run had run its course, I guess. So, yeah, just reminding myself that this is all for fun. You do this for a hobby. And if it gets frustrating, it's okay to take a step back and just kind of be content with where you're at for now and come back to it when you feel maybe a little more ready rather than burning yourself out.
That's fair. Yeah, I noticed a lot with SM64 runners, once they feel like they've pushed themselves to a certain limit, they either go to 70 star or 120 star, or
Mhm.
even in some cases down to like 0 star or one
Oh,
star.
yes. That is true. Then that's actually what I did. So, I forget what came first, whether it was 70 star or the randomizer. But yeah, I actually did switch categories to try to get something fresh. That didn't stick. I did a couple runs, but then I realized, this isn't really for me. So sometimes the category refresh can be something new, but it was also a steep learning curve, I remember.
Hmm. Are there any games you're looking forward to running?
Ooh, so at the time, or at this exact moment in time, I'm not really considering picking up many more speedruns at the moment, just because life is really busy right now. Rather, I like to watch runs, and obviously I've been involved with the Games Done Quick community for a while, so more than anything, it's just getting more involved in speedrunning that way and taking on new roles and new opportunities. If there was a game that I would pick up, I was really interested in Celeste for a bit. I learned the first chapter just because same as with Mario 64, it's very movement driven. You learn the inputs. There's different levels like beginner friendly, and then you can work up to more intermediate tricks as you go along. And I was really kind of drawn in by the friendly community and the very accessible tutorials that were there as well. Stardew Valley is a little tempting just because I'm already in the farming side of things, and I have a lot of friends in the Stardew Valley community already. Otherwise, yeah, there's no particular game that really calls out to me. Maybe some challenge runs or randomizer runs, but less conventional speed runs, I guess.
Okay, that's fair, and you also kind of half answered where you see yourself in 5 years' time, speedrun wise. Mm,
Yeah, so I can elaborate on that if you'd like.
sure.
Yeah, so in essence, I think for the time being, I'm semi-retired from speedruns myself. I am always on to either, like, commentate runs or I do the occasional thing here and there for running. But in general, I've found a lot of purpose and meaning in sort of the hosting side of things, the organizing side of things, and just getting to meet incredible runners and other people in general through those events. So, yeah, just sort of expanding into different communities, different events, and kind of taking it a little more casually with games for the time being, I think, yeah.
If you could create a game from an entirely different genre and add it to your favorite series, what genre of game would you add?
Oh. Okay. So this might either be a really good answer for me or a really bad answer for me. And reason being, I have a love-hate relationship with horror games. And I love like the Resident Evil series in particular. But when I say I love the series, I mean I watch someone else play while I sit next to them and scream. So I enjoy the concept, but actually playing through them myself stresses me out. However, there is a part of me that is really drawn into the dark horror elements in this comes as no surprise, but Legend of Zelda. And if we could get like a darker themed Legend of Zelda game that has horror elements, maybe not jump scares, but just more like creepy environmental tension more than anything. That would be really, really fun because I've always had a heart for some of the darker games in this series, like Majora's Mask has some darker elements, Twilight Princess has some darker elements, and to some degree, Tears of the Kingdom gets a little bit into that darker side as well without spoiling anything. But yeah, I think that's what I would do is try to get more of a, like, horror thriller type genre into the Legend of Zelda series because I think I might like that. I'd give it a shot anyways.
Okay, I like it. I like it. What is your opinion on IGT versus RTA?
Oh, I have to say I don't really have strong opinions either way. I am a super go with the flow person. Yeah, I definitely don't really have any strong opinions either way, I have to say. I'll just go with whatever people decide and cheer them on. But yeah, no strong
Mm,
opinions for me.
okay, fair. What would you say was your proudest moment as a runner?
Ooh, okay. There would be a couple. I think for OG Lana, getting that 1832 in SM64 was a huge moment because that was just a time that I was really, really happy with. I've never considered myself to be this incredible gamer. I've always had to put in a lot of time and effort to get good at games in general. So even though that time wasn't necessarily even close to competing with high world record times, that was just a number that I was really, really proud of because it still is not easily attainable by anybody. So that was a big moment for me. I think another moment was I'd say just my contribution to the Harvest Moon Magical Melody speedrunning community. At the time when I had picked it up, there were very few active runners and there wasn't really much progress made on the game. But I picked it up and just by streaming, building interest, we were able to bring the community together to really collaborate and we discovered some absolutely wild things about the game that we didn't know before. And we were actually able to completely revolutionize almost every single category, bringing down any percent to sub 2 hours and, well, any percent restricted. Then we found the code glitching that brought it under half an hour, which is absolutely ridiculous. I forget what the time is on that one right now, but it's very low. Marriage categories we halved as well. And I say that saying that I helped build excitement and actually putting the runs into practice, but I do also have to really recognize the contributions of all of our community members, in particular Desert Penguin, who discovered a lot of the code and did a lot of experiments with that in general. And also to Vidya for pushing me in those categories as well. And he's sort of our rote master with other marriage categories as well. So it's been a huge community effort, but I'm really proud of how I feel like I helped revive the game and sort of shape it into the runs that we have right now. So that's fun.
Nice. And to contrast that question, what would you say your lowest moment as a runner was?
Ooh, let me think. As a joke answer, when I decided that Bob Thong was a really good meme category, there's a story behind that one, but it's just a meme category in Harvest Moon where you race to a swimming festival just to see my favorite character in a very suspiciously small bathing suit, and that will taint me forever. But I think a more serious answer would just be, yeah, probably when I got to the point where I was really burning out on Mario 64 because I really genuinely had a deep love for the game, but I got to the point where I was beating myself into a wall and wasn't enjoying it anymore. So I that was probably my lowest point in terms of just mood and motivation to take on a speed run. So I definitely don't want to let myself get to that point again with a game, and rather than, yeah, sort of keep going with a game when I know its time is through, just sort of learning new things instead is something that I tend to benefit from.
That is completely fair and understandable. That's kind of why I don't do Silent Hill 3 that much, despite the fact that I submitted it to AGDQ 24,
Yeah.
because I did, play that game for like 500 hours straight, and it was just a very big drain after a while. So I
Yeah.
understand where you're coming from.
Mhm.
Do you have any event rituals?
Oh, yeah, high levels of panic and anxiety beforehand works great. That's a joke, don't don't panic. I think in general, I always need a hefty cup of coffee, but drinking it slow enough that I'm not gonna have to go to the bathroom 30 seconds later. But also, I what I've been trying to do is I am a person that I've been performing my whole life, and I've had performance anxiety my whole life. So, something I'm really trying to do when it comes to events in particular, even if they're online, is just really take a moment and acknowledge what I'm feeling and also try to recognize that the nervous butterflies and panic I'm feeling could actually just be excitement and anticipation for the event itself. So I kind of try to just reformulate the way I'm thinking about that and the way that I'm feeling and to say like it's your excitement, you're ready to do a good job and you will do a good job and mistakes will happen and that's okay. But also, yeah, taking deep breaths for myself because I do get really shaky, my knees start to go. And I always say, as soon as I get on the mic, I can sound confident, but especially if it's my first shift, you know that I'm actually shaking in my boots. And that's when I'm more likely to make mistakes. So, yeah, just really trying to take a step back, recognize what I'm feeling, and say, hey, it's okay. If something goes wrong, it goes wrong. We move on. And yeah, then eventually, as soon as we get into the flow of it, all of the fear and anxiety goes away, and it ends up being a great time.
And final question, do you have any influences in the speedrun world, as in people who have influenced you?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think in general, my main influences have just been the community members that have really inspired me to keep pushing with the games. So, like I had mentioned in the beginning, there were some really incredible friends that I had made through Mario 64 that honestly were just my biggest influences because they were the ones that would show up every day and cheer you on and they would stream themselves and they were way better than I would ever be. But there was still some inspiration there to have these really wonderful, kind people that are cheering you on and that are also giving their time to teach you new strategies and whatnot. Same thing with the Harvest Moon Story of Seasons games. The people that influence me and inspire me the most are just the community members that take their time to really teach new people, explore new strategies. And that's sort of the big thing. And I think in a broader sense, just the Games Done Quick community was a big influence because if I hadn't watched the first broadcast in 2016, I don't know if that speedrunning seed would have ever been planted because I didn't know speedrunning existed. And then later, by being just a casual attendee in 2019, and then later volunteering starting last year, just the whole community has really shaped how I view speedrunning and my own place in the speedrunning community in a broader sense. So that's held a lot of influence in my life for sure.
Nice. I also lied, that wasn't the last question, because the last question is, if people want to find you, where can they find you?
For sure. So I am Lanaruse pretty much everywhere. I am still on Twitter. I am holding strong until the boat just totally sinks. I am still on Twitch. I have a Twitch profile, but there's just information in the about section that directs you either to my old GDQ hotfix show that I used to run with the playlist, just the GDQ channel in general, as well as the Zeldathon channels. So those are the main places. You will likely hear me on Games Done Quick, either doing some one off events, some backup hosting, that sort of thing for hotfix, or sometimes hosting for main events and Frame Fatales events as well. And yeah, Zeldathon, I am also helping out with stuff over there. We have a Halloween event that'll be coming up at the end of next month as well. So you can check that out. And yeah, otherwise, just Twitter for my main little quips and wherever else people migrate. I'm slowly getting my name in other places, but haven't started posting anywhere else yet. So we'll see. But if you see Lanaruse, 90% of the time, it's me. So yeah.
Well, it has been an absolute pleasure. I thank you so much for coming on, and we will see you all next Saturday. Bye bye.
Bye.